Eric faced off alone against two bullies, who only relied on the power and influence of their families, lacking true resilience and character. With agility and smart tactics, Eric quickly defeated both of them in an instant, leaving them sprawled on the floor. The story rewinds to 3 months earlier. The fork accidentally fell to the ground, and immediately the atmosphere at dinner became tense. Eric's stepfather didn't let the small incident slide. He closed the door and taught Eric a lesson with violence. His mother, fully aware of what was happening, could only stand there helplessly. She convinced herself that these beatings would make Eric more obedient. After each torment, Eric was forced to pretend to reconcile with the man who had caused him so much pain. Gradually, violence became a familiar part of his life, but along with it, the resentment inside Eric grew, like a smoldering flame waiting for the right moment to ignite. The simmering anger inside Eric finally erupted into uncontrollable acts of violence. He frequently beat up his classmates, even going so far as to injure them in fits of rage. Eric's reputation for aggression silenced those around him, and no one dared intervene. His fights escalated, and eventually, the principal's patience reached its limit. After a serious altercation, Eric was called to the office, where the principal announced his expulsion, ending any tolerance for his misconduct. Eric's mother advised him to reach out to Gunnar, a friend of hers and an experienced lawyer. Gunnar handed Eric a business card and told him, "Call me if you need help." Eric could only hold the card, staring at it speechlessly. When Gunnar left, his mother openly expressed her disappointment about his expulsion. Surprisingly, she announced that she had enrolled him in Starburg, an all-boys boarding school. This was his last chance, she emphasized, and hoped that Eric would appreciate it and change, so he wouldn't make the same mistake again. Eric promised to make a greater effort to avoid repeating his mistakes. He was determined to graduate without any further incidents. On his first day at the new school, dressed in his neat uniform and with his hair cut short, Eric embarked on a new journey. His roommate Pierre was known as the smartest student at the school. Fortunately, Pierre was very friendly and approachable, and the two quickly became close friends. In the evening, Eric and Pierre went together to the dining hall for dinner. There, Eric met Johan, another student who eagerly introduced him to the school's special traditions. Johan explained that at this school, how people treated you wasn't just based on your personality, but also depended heavily on your social status. As soon as Johan finished speaking, he noticed a student sitting next to Eric who was suddenly called out by two people sitting at the far end of the table. They were Otto and Allen, sons of wealthy aristocratic families. Meanwhile, the student being called out came from an ordinary background. Otto and Allen were notorious for frequently bullying classmates who were less fortunate. With the support of their influential families, both acted with impunity, without fear of punishment. Furthermore, their positions as members of the student council only strengthened their power, allowing them to punish others without any obstacles. After dinner, Pierre invited Eric to go outside and smoke with him. Though slightly hesitant, Eric firmly refused, reminding himself of his promise to his mother that he would not break any rules. Johan interjected, warning that if they were caught, the punishment would be extremely severe. However, Pierre just laughed it off, reassuring Eric that they would never get caught. Persuaded by Pierre's persistent convincing, Eric reluctantly agreed. The next day, during breakfast, Otto and Delay approached Eric, announcing that they wanted to welcome him with a traditional initiation ceremony for new students, but Eric flatly refused. This decision immediately angered Otto and Delay, and instead of targeting Eric, they shifted their focus to Johan. They sat in the meeting and they made their rounds with everyone to let all the spooks know. A car sped straight into Johan, leaving him seriously injured and hospitalized that night. Meanwhile, Otto and Dalen continued to plot another bullying scheme, this time targeting Eric. They called him to the student council's headquarters and ordered him to clean up the pile of dirty shoes scattered on the floor. However, Eric refused the request and turned to walk away. Enraged by Eric's defiant attitude, Dalen turned to Otto, asking how they should handle him. Otto told Dalen to leave it for now and wait for the right moment. After leaving, Eric went to find Pierre and told him everything, feeling anxious but unable to hide his frustration at the unfair situation. Pierre fell silent, his face clearly tense as he listened to Eric recount everything. He sighed and seriously warned that confronting Otto and Delon was like asking for trouble. Pierre explained that students who dared to defy them usually faced brutal punishments. However, Eric, having once been a bully himself, merely scoffed at Pierre's advice. He confidently stated that he wasn't afraid of those two and would never submit to any of their orders. That night, the two sat together, trying to come up with a way to stand up to Otto and Dalon without resorting to violence. But all their efforts were in vain. Most students at the school preferred to live in obedience, accepting humiliation rather than facing painful beatings. The next morning, as Eric was walking down the hallway, Dalon accidentally bumped into him. Instead of apologizing, Dalon arrogantly demanded that Eric take responsibility and apologize to him. Eric, feeling that he wasn't at fault since Dalon was the one who had bumped into him, flatly refused. Eric's firmness angered Dalon, who immediately challenged him to a fight at a designated location. As night fell, Eric arrived at the meeting spot, bringing Pierre and Johan along just in case. On the way, Pierre repeatedly reminded Eric that Otto and Dalon were notorious for playing dirty. They never fought fairly, always pulling in friends to overwhelm their opponents. That night, Eric initially accepted Dalon's challenge, ready to face him head-on. But as he recalled his mother's advice about maintaining the right attitude in order to graduate and turn his life around, he changed his mind. In his room, Pierre tried to comfort him, helping Eric overcome his anxiety. Meanwhile, at the meeting spot, Otto, Dalon, and their friends continued to wait. After hours with no sign of Eric, Otto, with a smug smile, declared that Eric was just a weakling, too scared to face them. The next day, Otto publicly announced a list of students who had defied the student council's orders, with Eric at the top of the condemned list. In a mock trial, Otto, wielding the power of the student council president, sentenced Eric to a month of hard labor, demanding that he dig a 1-meter-deep trench around the school. Eric worked through the night, sweat pouring down, but he couldn't finish the task on time, and was forced to have dinner alone in the empty hallway. As Eric ate, Maria, a cafeteria worker, approached. She seemed intrigued as Eric shared his story, which reminded her of her own brother. Maria continued, saying that her brother had also been defiant, always refusing to bow to any authority. After the meal, Maria unexpectedly appeared beside Eric again, advising him to take care of his health. But what surprised Eric even more was when she kissed him gently on the cheek and hugged him tightly. Both of them knew well that any romantic relationship between a student and a staff member was strictly forbidden at the school, and the consequences if discovered would be severe. Eric could be expelled, and Maria would be immediately fired. Despite that, the moment they shared remained an indelible memory for both of them. That night, both Eric and Maria paid no attention to the rules. During the Christmas break, when Eric returned home, his mother greeted him warmly, but his stepfather was cold and distant. He interrogated Eric about the punishments he had endured, including being suspended. Eric explained that he had refused to obey the orders of a student who was the son of a powerful family at the school. His stepfather argued that the son of a noble family deserved respect and obedience, criticizing Eric for his poor academic performance and the punishments he had received. Afterward, Eric's stepfather beat him again, and his mother, though she clearly saw her son's pain, did not intervene. After the Christmas break, Eric returned to school. The first thing he did was rush to meet Maria, as he had missed her terribly during their time apart. Under the moonlight they reunited, embracing each other tightly, finding comfort in each other's arms. When Otto and Dalon learned that Eric had returned to school, they immediately came up with a new prank. This time, they planned to pour dirty water on Eric while he was sleeping. However, their plan failed. Eric and Pierre woke up immediately and quickly cleaned up the mess they had left behind. This time, Eric decided to get revenge. Taking advantage of the silence, he quietly sneaked into Otto's room, turned off the lights, and poured dirty water on him while Otto was fast asleep. The next morning, in the dining hall, Eric deliberately spoke loudly so everyone could hear. He breathed in deeply, then started walking around the room, pretending to follow a scent. Finally, he stopped right in front of Otto, who was having breakfast. Eric smirked and loudly called Otto filthy. Otto, furious, lost his temper because Eric had the audacity to humiliate him in front of everyone. Eric said to Eric, "Girls, princesses will be watching you when I'm out here. Do you understand?" Otto rushed in and punched Eric. Despite being beaten relentlessly, Eric remained determined to resist. He clearly remembered the promise he made to his mother to stay out of trouble. Meanwhile, the principal and teachers sat at a nearby table, calmly eating as if they hadn't noticed what was happening. Witnessing this, Maria stepped in, moving forward and asking Otto to stop. Though disappointed that Eric continued to endure without retaliating, Maria couldn't shake his resolve. Realizing they couldn't break Eric's spirit, Otto and Dalon decided to shift their focus to Pierre, Eric's roommate and his only friend at the school. During lunch, Otto called Pierre over. However, Pierre firmly refused, saying he hadn't done anything wrong to Otto. Otto was not the type to give up easily. After school, he challenged Pierre to a confrontation and threatened severe punishment if Pierre refused. Along with Alan, Otto intentionally targeted Pierre, provoking him to drag Eric into the situation. They knew Eric wouldn't stand by while his best friend was being bullied without intervening. Their goal was clear: force Eric to get involved, as they were certain that no one at the school would dare to oppose Otto and Alan's power. That night, Pierre had no choice but to accept the challenge. He went to Battleground, where Otto, Dylan and their gang had already gathered. Pierre understood that this battle was not just about defending himself, but also a test of courage and determination. Even though he knew he was facing a group stronger in both numbers and power, he told himself he had to fight to the end, not allowing himself to be subdued by their threats. Pierre's strength seemed to drain away, and with just a light blow from Otto, he collapsed to the ground. Eric couldn't believe what he was witnessing, his best friend lying motionless, humiliated, and treated as nothing more than a game. "Listen," he said. By the time Eric arrived, it was already too late. He could only carry Pierre back to the room and tend to his friend's wounds himself. Once Pierre was stable, Eric advised him to rest and left quietly. That night, Eric sought out Maria to vent the frustration and helplessness building up inside him. The next morning, they received more threats from Otto's group. Worried about Pierre's condition, Eric rushed back to the room, unwilling to leave his friend for even a moment, as he now understood more than ever that Pierre needed his protection. When Eric returned to the room, he was stunned by the emptiness. Pierre had left, taking all of his belongings. On the bed, there was only a letter. In the letter, Pierre expressed his deep gratitude to Eric, calling him the only true friend he had ever had. He apologized for choosing to leave, but encouraged Eric not to give up. Pierre urged Eric to keep standing up and fighting against Otto and his gang, to end the cycle of injustice and brutality at the school. The words in the letter sparked a fire in Eric's heart, fueling his determination. He told himself that he wouldn't let Pierre and those who had suffered be disappointed. For the first time, Eric realized his true mission, not only to avenge Pierre, but also to bring justice to all the students oppressed by Otto's ruthless hand. Without hesitation, Eric walked into the dining hall and faced Dalon. He declared that he would confront Otto in the arena, determined to put an end to the days of oppression. An hour later in the arena, Eric stood alone, facing Elaine and von Schennen, two individuals known for their superior physical strength. However, both of them relied solely on the power and influence of their families, lacking true skill. Eric, with his agility and smart tactics, easily defeated both of them in the blink of an eye, leaving them sprawled on the arena floor. The atmosphere was silent, and all eyes turned toward Otto, who was stunned by the defeat of his strongest henchman. Eric moved toward him, exuding confidence and challenging him. Before the final confrontation, Eric decided to find Maria in the school kitchen, hoping she would be a source of encouragement in this crucial moment. But when he arrived, he was shocked to hear from a staff member that Maria had been fired and had left the school. Maria's absence was a shock, but it also made Eric more determined. He told himself, "For all those who have suffered injustice, I cannot stop." The staff member quietly handed Eric a letter from Maria, just like how Pierre had left before. Holding the letter in his hands, Eric felt a deep sorrow at her departure. The letter contained Maria's final words, filled with blessings and hopes that Eric would continue to be strong. One of Otto's henchmen, who happened to see Eric receive the letter, quickly reported it to Otto. Not long after, Otto and his accomplices stormed into Eric's room, showing no intention of hiding their motives. He ordered them to search everything, rummaging through Eric's belongings. Eventually, they found the letter from Maria. He read each line aloud as he realized the secret the letter revealed, the relationship between Eric and Maria. This was his opportunity to punish Eric. Holding the letter up like a trophy, Otto triumphantly declared that with this evidence, Eric could not escape being expelled. Otto quickly took the letter to the principal, presenting the proof of Eric's misconduct. The principal, without needing much time to review, immediately summoned Eric. With a stern expression, he announced the decision to expel Eric for serious violations, particularly concerning Maria. Faced with the punishment, Eric neither panicked nor resisted. He calmly accepted it, but before leaving, he asked the principal to return Maria's letter, the last memento he had left. However, the principal coldly refused, saying that the letter would be kept as part of the violation record, and locked it away in a drawer as if burying Eric's memories. Expelled, losing his friends and Maria, Eric felt as if everything had been stripped away from him. But it was this very pain that ignited the flame of determination within him. With everything Otto had caused, Eric couldn't leave Starburg without clearing things up. With nothing left to lose, he was ready to face Otto, no matter the outcome. Following Otto's trail, Eric found him walking alone in the desolate forest. Confronting his enemy, Eric held a stick in his hand, his gaze cold and sharp, and commanded Otto to kneel. Faced with Eric's resolute attitude, Otto, who had always relied on power to oppress others, was completely stripped of his arrogance. In a panic, he shakily knelt down. Desperate, Otto suddenly pulled out $10,000 from his coat pocket, offering it to Eric as a bribe to save his life, but Eric refused. Sensing the rising anger within Eric, Otto completely collapsed. He cried, begged for forgiveness, and even vomited from fear. Seeing this pitiable sight, Eric instinctively stopped. He bent down, grasped Otto's face, looked deep into his fearful eyes, and told him he wouldn't kill him. Eric reminded him that he would not take pleasure in the pain of others. These words felt like a declaration, not just for Otto, but also for Eric himself, affirming the person he wanted to become. Leaving Otto behind in fear, Eric returned to the school. He packed his belongings and left. Remembering Gunnar, the lawyer who had once told him he could reach out for help any time, Eric decided to contact Gunnar and explain the entire story. Not long after, Gunnar arrived at Starburg, exuding the confidence and decisiveness of someone ready to fight for justice. After understanding the situation, Gunnar and Eric went straight to the principal's office. The principal, comfortably drinking and surrounded by faculty members, showed no sign of concern at Eric's appearance. Eric stood before him, pleading for a chance to stay at the school and requesting the return of Maria's letter. However, the principal flatly refused, stating that Eric did not deserve any leniency. It was then that Gunnar stepped forward, advising the principal to reconsider his decision. If not, he would not hesitate to expose the entire truth, from the culture of class discrimination to the bullying that the principal and staff had condoned. With no way out, the principal was forced to concede to Gunnar's pressure. He agreed to all of Eric's demands, including returning Maria's letter and disbanding the student council led by Otto. This decision marked the end of an era of oppression, bringing hope to the students who had endured injustice. Eric felt deeply grateful to Gunnar, who had helped him protect not only his own rights, but also contributed to changing the school environment. Thanks to Gunnar's support, Eric not only continued his studies at Starburg, but also successfully overthrew the authoritarian regime that Otto and his supporters had established. In the days that followed, the atmosphere at school became lighter and more peaceful. Eric poured all his energy into his studies and enjoyed his final time at Starburg. When he graduated, he left with proud achievements and the admiration of many fellow students. Eric's mother was overjoyed by her son's achievements. She was proud of how he had overcome adversity, while his stepfather remained unchanged, continuing to blame and criticize Eric for his actions at school. But this time, those criticisms couldn't shake Eric, for he had proven that he was stronger than any judgment. When his stepfather prepared to raise his hand to strike him again, Eric was no longer afraid. Determined to stand up for himself, Eric declared that this would be the last time violence would appear in their home. Eric no longer wanted to live in fear and oppression, so he decided to kick his stepfather out of the house, putting an end to all the years of suffering. After some time, Eric began rebuilding his life. Eventually, he reunited with his close friend, who was about to leave for Geneva to continue his studies. They promised each other that they would keep in touch and meet again one day. The feeling of freedom and hope returned to Eric, and he knew that a bright new future awaited him.